This next demo covers gradients, blends, and gradient mesh. So we have our swatch palette here. Really won't need layers for this. And I'm going to start with gradients. So I will draw a rectangle. And we have a black stroke and a fill of none. The easiest way to create a gradient is to go into your swatches and start with a black and white. So I put a black and white fill on there. I'm going to need my gradient palette, so I'm going to go Window, Gradient, and here's the gradient palette. Now, to change this gradient, all we simply do is take the colors from the swatch palette and drag them into the gradient palette. So I'll just grab a color and drag it in here. And now it sits beside the black one. Now I'm going to grab another color and drag it to the other side. Okay, I've added two colors to this gradient. Now, we have sliders here, so we can move these. I'm now going to remove the white and the black by clicking and pulling it out of there. Okay, so I've created a new two-color gradient. And this is called the midpoint. If you slide it this way, you'll get more purple. If I slide it this way, I'll get more orange. Now I can edit the gradient. Okay, I can also get to that by hitting G, which will put me in the gradient tool. And then I can move these along over top of the actual artwork. Okay, you can also move this and really get exactly what you're looking for. You can also rotate it. You see right here, and now I can rotate the gradient. Notice as I'm rotating it, it shows up here. What I can do, if you want to do it by the numbers, I could just put a 45 on that. Okay, so this is good for modifying an angle, especially when you're doing a tech illustration, trying to just get a certain angle. You can get it close and then just start modifying it. Or you can grab it and do it like that. Okay, so that is a linear gradient. Now I'm going to reduce this. And I'm going to make a couple copies of this gradient. So I'm just going to Option drag it. Now I have four shapes with the gradient on each shape. What I would like to do is spread that gradient all the way through these four shapes. So I'm in my selection tool. I'm going to hit Command A, select all. Then I'm going to hit G, puts me in the gradient tool. And I'm just going to drag all the way through. And I've now applied that gradient to all four shapes. Every time you make a gradient, you want to save it. So you could grab it from your fill and just drag it right into your swatch palette. And then when you save the document, it will save that gradient. Okay, so that is a linear gradient. Delete those. Now we have three types of gradients. We have a linear gradient, a radial gradient, and a freeform gradient, which is a relatively new tool. We saw the linear gradient. Now we want to look at radial. What I'm going to do is draw a circle with the ellipse tool. So I'll shift drag. And once again, I'm going to go back to that black and white gradient. Okay. And then in here on my gradient palette, I'm going to switch it to a radial. Okay. So now I have this white spot in the center, kind of a hot spot there. And what I'm going to do is replace the black with a color, like a purple. I'll drag it in there. And then I'll yank the black out. Okay. Now I can move this hot spot around with the gradient tool. If I hit G, I can just say click up in here. And that's where it throws it. And I've created a sphere. And once again, you can take that and save it. The last one in here is the freeform, relatively new. We'll go ahead and make another rectangle. And if I click on this, it's starts like that. And then what you do is you select points, and then here's your fill, and then you throw a color on there. And you can just start adding colors. Okay, kind of get a tie-dye effect. So that is the freeform gradient. Okay, next is the blend tool, with the blend feature. And first we're going to start off by understanding how it functions. The blend tool is good for bending gradients, but first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a star. I'm going to shift drag, make a little star, and I'm going to throw a solid color on there. And then I'm going to get rid of the stroke of none. Then I'm going to make a bigger star down here. I'm going to make that a different color with a stroke of none. Then basically I want to blend these two shapes together. So I'll hold down Shift to get them both selected. And then I'm going to go Object, Blend, Make, or Option Command B. And see, it'll blend those two shapes together. Gives you a nice effect. Okay, now I'm going to reselect that. And I'm going to go under Object, Blend, and I'm going to go to Blend Options. And right now this is on Smooth color. I'm going to put this on Specified Steps. And right now this blend is taking 185 steps. Basically that's telling me there's 185 stars here to create this blend, which means that makes your file size really big. But we can change the specified steps to actually see them. I'm going to switch this to 8 steps. And we'll just preview it. So there's 8 steps creating that blend. Okay. Now I'm just going to do that. Now, if you want to release the blend, you go Object, Blend, Release. We're back to our 2 stars. Now there's also a blend tool in here. That's this guy right here. And we can use that to blend. If you're going to blend 2 shapes together with the blend tool, you want to make sure you click on corresponding anchor points. That means if I click up here, I need to click here. It'll create it. I'm going to undo that, Command Z. If you don't click on corresponding anchor points, it will twist your blend. Okay, this is important. What I'm getting at is when you blend 2 shapes together, they need to have the same amount of anchor points. If you try to blend a shape with 5 anchor points into a shape with 8 anchor points, you won't get a very good effect. So a lot of times what we do is we copy the shape, enlarge it, and then blend them together. Now also when you're doing your blends, you have to make sure you don't have a black stroke. If you have a black stroke on your shapes, that black stroke will appear on the blend. So we'll see what happens here. You can see it's turning black. So you can get rid of that without having to undo it just by giving it a stroke of none. Well, it looks like you can't do that. So I'm just going to undo that. Okay, now that is how blends work, but as I said, a blend is really good for bending a gradient, maybe on a car fender. So what we're going to do for this is I'm going to draw a curve shape. I'm just going to click and drag up, and then I'm going to click and drag down. And I want to close this path, and then I will go ahead and reselect it. And I'm going to throw a light blue on this first shape, lose the stroke. Then I'm going to copy this shape. And I'm just going to hold down Option and Option Drag with my selection tool. The shape that I copied, I'm going to throw a dark blue on and a stroke of none. Okay, and then I will blend these 2 shapes together by selecting them And going object blend make. Okay, not what I wanted. There must have been an anchor point down here. So I'm going to Command Z that. And I had a kind of feeling when I saw this that was going to happen. So I'm going to deselect. I'm going to hit Command Y. And that guy was there. Okay, Command Y again. And we'll try that again. So we select them. Object blend make. There we go. Now we can adjust this blend with our handles. And we know that if we use our direct selection tool, white arrow, we can click, find the path, and then our handles will pop up. And we can adjust. So we're basically bending this gradient along our shape. Okay. Next is the mesh tool or gradient mesh tool. And to demo this, I'm just going to make an ellipse. Mesh tool is very hard to master. It takes a lot of work. I'm going to throw a solid color on here. One thing you need to know about the mesh tool, if you start with a gradient and you use the mesh tool, it's just going to turn it black. The mesh tool works on flat colors. So you need to start off with a flat color. Okay, so I'm going with a dark blue and I have no stroke on it. Then I'm going to take the mesh tool, it's right here, shortcut key is U, and I'm going to just start clicking in here and creating a grid. I don't want to put too many in here. Okay, now if I select one of these anchor points with the mesh tool, we have this quadrant that we can now apply a second color to. So my fill is forward, so I'm going to put a light color on there. And you can see. Now I'm going to zoom in on that. And with my direct selection tool, I can adjust this. I can grab my handles and manipulate it. As I said, it takes a lot of practice. You can't really drag them outside of here because it'll do that. So I'm going to Command Z that. Okay. This is, by the way, this is one of our quizzes, gradient mesh quiz. Now, part of the mesh quiz is you'll apply a second color in here, and then you also put a light color along the edge. So to do that, I need to just select these anchor points out here. So I'm going to deselect. Actually, I'm going to reselect it with my selection tool. I'm sorry, I'm going to select it with the deselection tool. There we go. Because everything's open now. Now I'm going to get the lasso. This is the lasso tool. And it's basically a selection tool that you can lasso things. I'll put my cap lock on because I like to see this X. And I'm going to lasso these anchor points outside here so I can select them all at one time. And then I'm going to apply a lighter blue. You can see I'm getting a light blue edge there. So that's a nice effect. So that's how the mesh tool works. As I said, it takes a lot of practice, and it works when you keep it to colors in the same family. Okay, that'll be another one of our quizzes down the road. Now I'm going to show you guys some samples of all three of these. First we'll talk about gradients. This is a tech illustration which has a lot of gradients on it. We need to take a look. We look at our swatches here, and I'm going to get my layers. Okay, close this. So if I hide this top layer, this is the original photo that they used, and they traced over it. And then they traced the shapes and applied gradients. And you can see all the gradients here that they saved in their swatches. Now I can pull these out of here. We can get a look at them. And here's our gradient palette. So you can see we've got this copper into white. There's a lot of them in here I can just yank out. And you can take a look at the gradient that's in there. There's also a transparent gradient here. I believe on this windshield. So I'm going to go window transparency. See, that's 39%. So see, that's what it was originally, solid, and then they made it transparent to get that effect that you're actually seeing through the glass. So that worked out nice. Real nice thing they did here. This student was really thinking here. See this back bumper? When you first look at it, you might think it's 3 or 4 shapes. It's basically just one shape with a gradient thrown on it. If I could get it. Yep, there he is, and you can see right here. And one thing about when you're doing gradients, if you pull a bunch of colors in and get them close together, it starts to create lines. In fact, you can't get, when you have a lot of colors, you can't get it to be smooth. But they use that to their advantage for the bumper. Okay, so that's gradients on a tech illustration. Next, I want to show you how you might use a blend on a tech illustration. This is a BMW. And you can see all the gradients and colors saved in the swatch palette. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this door out of here, this little gradient that's on this door. Okay, now you can see it has a wave to it. And it's basically the same shape blended together. So, because it's obviously not a linear gradient. So I'm going to release that blend, object blend release. You can see it's 2 shapes. It's actually the same shape. So I'm going to deselect. And to do this, what you would do is you would copy that shape. I'm going to option drag. Okay. And then I would color the new shape. You know, we can eyedrop it off of this. Okay. And then I want to modify it to get it looking a little more like this. So I'm just going to take the bounding box and squeeze a little bit. And then I'll rotate it some. Now I can blend these two together. See, it's the same shape. It has the same amount of anchor points. So it'll give you a nice blend. It'll give you that wavy look. Object, blend, make. Okay, so that's how they did that. Also back, move this out of the way. Put this back. Here it is, right here. They did the same thing here. So pull that out of there. And object blend release. And you can see they took the same shape, copied it, put it back together, and blended it. So that's good use of the blend tool. And then I have some samples here of mesh, gradient mesh. As I keep saying, mesh is really hard to master. But I have some professional work here. I showed you Iron Man at the beginning of the term. This is a Japanese artist, professional artist, did these bottles. And if we zoom in here, you get a good look. And you can see I can take my direct selection tool and start to select these points. And you can see the colors here on the fill. As I go out more or this way, you can see how they're getting darker. So if you need them to be in the same family, but this is all done with mesh. Same with this beer bottle. Even this looks very photographic. Okay, so that's a good example of mesh. I have another one here. I can locate it. And here we go. Very photographic looking. And this is all mesh. This is all done in Illustrator. You zoom in on this. These olives. And I'll take the gradient mesh. You can see the background's mesh also. But you can just start selecting. And the colors will start to show up on the fill. So when people master this, what they do is they eyedrop all their colors first off their photo source. And then they have a good palette to work with. And then they go ahead and start to apply it. So real good example here of mesh. Okay, so that is gradients, gradient mesh, and the blend tool.